Welcome to the Impact Disciple Making Podcast. I'm Mike Keaton, your host, and I am glad that you have joined us today. Once again, I'm joined with Ken Adams, the lead pastor of Crossroads Church and founder of Impact Ministries, and we've been having conversations about making disciples. And we're glad that you've joined us. We've been talking about a disciple-making strategy. And so we've covered several aspects of that strategy. Ken, I'll let you kind of review a little bit of that with our audience. But today we're going to be talking about the third step of that, which is the plug-in strategy. But go ahead.
Yeah, so you know what, Mike? First of all, this is the right conversation to have, man. In fact, this is the most important conversation that churches ought to be having, man. And so the reason I say that is because if the very thing Jesus told us to do is to make disciples, and that is our mission, then for goodness sakes, man, we ought to be trying to figure out how we do that. And we don't have to make it up. We just have to look at the model. And Jesus is the model of how we're supposed to go about making disciples. And so the principles are exactly the same today as they were 2,000 years ago. And so when you look at the life of Christ, what Jesus did is that first thing he did is he gave people an invitation. He just said, come and see. And he invited people to find out more. And so Jesus reached out to the lost world around him. And then he lifted up the Father. He literally drew a crowd of people and he lifted up, magnified the Father. And then from there, he wanted them to take a next step. They weren't necessarily ready to become world changers, but they were ready to take a step into relational community, into a different level, a different layer of relationship with him than just being a part of a crowd. Mm-hmm. They were ready to come be a part of really doing life together.
And so when you say level, that also indicates a different level of commitment from them. And one of the things that always seems to be a struggle, I mean, we're just glad if people come back a second time sometimes. So we've done our part, right? We reached out, they've come, we've helped them see Christ lifted up in their life. We've lifted up Christ to them. So, getting them to plug in can be one of the most difficult ththings. And so what do you think about that and ways that we can go about that?
Mike, honestly, of all the things that we do, I think reaching out and getting people to come a first time, it's pretty hard. But also getting people to go from just being a part of a weekend crowd to becoming an active part of a church family, a church body, it is incredibly challenging today. And I think part of the reason why is just because of the willingness for people to commit, and the willingness for people to go past just being a fringe follower. Literally, the difference is going from a participant or just a spectator to a real participant and being really a part of it. And so people like to just kind of keep it at a safe distance and say, I'm okay coming and I'm okay listening, but I don't really necessarily want to get involved. I don't necessarily want to really commit to anything. And so once you take that next step from the crowd into a relational context, that is a different level of commitment. And that honestly has changed a lot over the years. In fact, here's a great example. I remember when there was not too many years ago when people would actually come to a Sunday school group, a small group, before they would come to a worship service. A few years ago, attendance in Sunday school in most churches would be larger than it would be in the weekend service. That's not true anymore. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, the worship service always has a larger attendance than the Sunday school or the small group attendance. And so that has been a reversal, even just in my own lifetime, even just recently.
Mm-hmm. So if that's changed so much, and it certainly has and probably will continue, I mean, how do you go about helping people take that next step?
Well, that's a great question. And I think ultimately it comes back to being a place and helping people understand, first of all, what their need is, but then secondly, helping the people to see that the church is a place to help meet that need. So for an example, one of the first things is that everybody has a need to belong. Now, sometimes that need to belong has been misplaced. And so a lot of people find that need or that sense of belonging being met in maybe a place where they go to work out, or maybe in their work, or maybe in a social environment, or maybe just hanging out at a club somewhere where everybody knows your name. And so a lot of people have that need to belong, need to have somebody know who you are. They misplace that. So one of the things that Christ has created the church to be is a place where you can belong, where you can have life-changing relationships, and those people can come alongside of you and encourage you and help you to grow and help you to really experience life the way you were created to. Not to be a lone ranger, but to live life in community of believers. So the first thing is that we can help people understand their need to belong. Second thing is that people have a need to be needed. People want to contribute. People want to give back. And so at first, people might be a little bit resistant as to how to do that, but it's important for us to help people understand what their purpose is, and help people to understand that there is a bigger picture for them to be a part of and to be involved in. And so, Jesus did this. In fact, Jesus not only invited his disciples into community, but he also gave them a greater purpose for their lives. The very first thing he said was, "Come and follow me, belong, and I will make you what? Fishers of men." Right. So here's what he did. Right from the beginning, Jesus created community for them to be a part of, to belong to, and then he gave them purpose. He gave them something bigger than fishing for fish. He said, you can make your life count. Man, if we can help people to understand that when they come to a weekend crowd and they experience God's presence and they experience fellowship of belief, if they could understand that there is a next step in that process, and that next step in that process is to enter into a Christ-centered community, enter into relationship where all of the one another's that the Scripture teaches us can be fleshed out, can be practiced, and can be demonstrated in our lives. And then if they can understand how they can be a contributor and not just a consumer, how they can be using what their gifts, their abilities, their talents that they have to help make a difference in the world for Christ, then they are one step closer to becoming a fully trained disciple of Jesus Christ. It's tough, but we've got to help people get plugged in. We really do.
So just for practical purposes, what are two environments you could think of right off the top of your head that they'll get community and they'll find a place to make a difference?
So the first thing would be a small group. And so we actually here at our church, we are structured and we're organized where people can be in a small group, because people learn best and are cared for best when they are in circles and not in rows. Right. People use this all the time, but disciples are not made in rows. Disciples are made in circles, in small groups. So we want to get people into a small group. And so, when I'm sitting in a row, all I can see is the back of your head. But when I'm sitting in a circle, man, we make eye contact. That's right. And we know each other. And then also, we want to get people on a team. We want to get people on a ministry team. And so if you can find out where a person's passion, their giftedness, and their maturity level are, and you can put those together in a ministry team environment, might mean that they're using their gifts in music, or in children's ministry, or student ministry, or maybe in hospitality, whatever it might be. There's so many different ways that a person can contribute and give back to the mission of Jesus Christ. So find a group, find a team, get plugged in.
That's good. And it's so important for us to always keep in mind that it's not so much about us getting the people in the groups so that we can say we've got this number of people in groups, or getting somebody on a team because we need somebody to help out with the 4 and 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
I mean, those needs and those realities may be true, but the ultimate issue is making disciples.
Yeah.
They need that to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the church does need people to serve, but to be honest with you, we need that in our lives more than the church needs that for us.
Right. And you've said more than once throughout these podcasts that it's about the people.
Yeah.
It's always about the people and making
it's about
disciples.
relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So very
It's
good. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Ken, and thank you guys for joining us today on this episode of the Disciple Making Strategy part of this podcast, as we've been talking about that. So reach out, lift up, and plug in. And if you let us know that you've tuned into this podcast, then we will also make available to you a free resource. And Ken's written so many resources to help churches flesh it out in their lives and their ministries. And this one's called Making Disciples Like Jesus Made. And I think it'd be very helpful for you in your context. Thanks again for joining us today. God bless you.